Hey, what's up? So, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about George R. R. Martin's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. It's a series of novellas that he started writing in 1998. This book right here collects the three published novellas in this series that have come out so far. And he plans on continuing this series until the end of these characters. So, this series takes place about 90 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It follows two main characters, Dunk and Egg. Dunk is short for Duncan. Now, Dunk is a squire for a hedge knight. A hedge knight being a knight that has no home, kind of just travels wherever he wants and gives his services to whoever needs it. And Dunk's knight has just passed away, and right before he passed away, he made Dunk a knight. So now he's Sir Duncan. And right away, right at the beginning of the story, he meets a little boy with a shaved head named Egg. And he's named Egg for his shaved head. And there's more to the story of Egg than meets the eye, but that's revealed later, and I don't want to spoil it for you. I'll talk about spoilers all the way at the end of this review. I think it's worth you knowing who he is. It'll make it more interesting. It might make you more interested to read the books. But if you want to go in completely spoiler-free, I'm not going to say that here. That's the basic premise of it, and now Dunk and Egg are together, and they go off on an adventure, basically. And that's the very beginning of the very first story out of the three in this book. Now, there's lots of things I liked about this book. There's only one perspective. You know, in Game of Thrones, it hops between all the different main characters in the books, and you see the world through all their different eyes, which works great for that story. But for this story, which is a lot more focused, it was great to be able to follow one character from beginning to end the entire time. It's through the eyes of Sir Duncan. So I really like that focus. I loved both of the main characters. Duncan is somebody that you can really root for. He has a lot of honor, a lot like Brienne or Ned or Davos, you know, one of those good characters that you can get behind. And Egg is fiercely loyal to Duncan. He sees that honor, and that's something that draws Egg to Dunk. That relationship they formed was really satisfying. Another thing I liked was that it was set 90 years before Game of Thrones, so it's set during the time when Targaryens are still in power. So you don't really see a lot of Targaryens during Game of Thrones, but here they're everywhere. There's a bunch of them. They're all still alive. It's cool to see the world under the rule of the Targaryens that you hear so much about during Game of Thrones, but not get to see for yourself. There's a lot of cameos from basically anybody who you can think of that would be over, 90 years old. Pretty much every old character from Game of Thrones makes a little cameo. Nothing important, but still it's cool to see, like, for example, Aemon, the maester at the wall, as a little kid, and the three-eyed raven, who is with Bran is with right now during Game of Thrones series, you get to see him as before he became that guy. He is the hand of the king, and I won't say more than that. He's the only character from the main story who gets kind of a bigger role. It's still not a big role, but it's more than a cameo. You get to see him as he was during his regular life. This whole day I've been reading theories and links between the time of the Hedge Knight series and the Game of Thrones series, who's related to who and all this stuff. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end again. The last thing that I really like is that it has illustrations in this edition of the book. You can see a full color illustration right here. There's Sir Duncan and Egg, and within the book there's actually illustrations too. They're all kind of pen and ink, not color, but they really added a lot to the story, so I like that. Another thing I liked about it is that it's kind of a simpler story. You're just following these two guys around, going on an adventure, small scale problems, between one house and another, or other things. I don't want to spoil too much, but it gets away from all the grandiose Game of Thrones political stuff, which Game of Thrones is great for, but here you're getting a small adventure on a small scale. One thing that I didn't really like about the story was that George can go on and on about little things that don't really matter, and for example, heraldry, which is all the signs, like the Starks have the wolf, the Lannisters have the lion, and all that stuff, and he goes into details about the heraldry of characters that are introduced and killed on the same page, and it's like, why did I need to know all that detail? Some people like that. It's more world building, but to me, if it's not an important character, I don't need to know that much detail, and he keeps doing that over and over again. So that's one thing I didn't like. But overall, I really like the stories. Do I recommend it? I definitely do. If you want to spend more time in the world of Westeros, I actually recommend it to show watchers too, because I can understand that going back and reading the Game of Thrones series is kind of retreading ground that you've already seen in the show. But here you get to see a world or stories that you wouldn't get otherwise. And it's really short, relatively. It's only like about 100-ish pages per story, and there's 3 of them. So yeah, I think you should read it if you're interested. Now here I'm going to go into light spoiler territory, which means that I'm not going to spoil the story of this book, but I do want to tell you some things that I think would get you more interested in reading the book. So Egg, the little squire, is actually a Targaryen named Aegon. So Egg is actually short for Aegon, and you find that out in the very first story, so it's not like a huge spoiler, but that's kind of what makes him so interesting, because once Dunk finds out that he's a prince, basically, he's the grandson of the current king during this time, he can't just keep taking him around, right? But certain circumstances happen, and they get permission from the Targaryens to allow Egg to follow Duncan around to go on the rest of their adventures. Now, what I love about Egg is you already kind of know his future. You also know that Egg grows up to become Aegon V, a king, and he's actually the last good Targaryen king. He's the grandfather of Aerys, the Mad King, who Jaime later kills, right? And so the Mad King and his father were not good kings. So Aegon, or Egg, happens to be the last good Targaryen king. So some other cool connections are, it's heavily rumored that Brienne is a descendant of Sir Duncan, because they were both so big, and there's a bunch of other connections. I think that's as much as I'll go into with spoilers. So thanks for listening to this review, and let me know if it helped you. Definitely let me know if you go and pick up the book. I want to talk to you about it. All right? Later.